In this recording, we'll cover the diencephalon and the brainstem. The diencephalon includes the hypothalamus, the thalamus, and the pituitary gland, and is located pretty much almost dead center in the interior portion of the brain. Okay, so first we have the hypothalamus. Okay, you know that hypo means below, so it's going to sit below the thalamus. In this picture, the thalamus is this blue, almost egg-shaped region, so right below that would be the hypothalamus. Okay. Now, the hypothalamus is kind of a big deal. Okay, there are a lot of things that happen through your hypothalamus. We maintain homeostasis by assisting with controlling your autonomic nervous system, your ANS. You might know your ANS better as your fight or flight and your rest and digest functions of your brain. This also controls your emotional responses and helps regulate your body temperature, your food intake, so your hunger, your thirst, things like that, so also your water balance, your sleep-wake cycle. It also controls your endocrine system functions to a degree. So like, look, y'all, your hypothalamus, it does so many things. Like, it really is a big deal. Now, if you were to make the very poor decision of taking ecstasy, so the illegal drug ecstasy, this could actually destroy your hypothalamus, which would literally reset your body temperature to be hotter and hotter and hotter, and you could basically like fry your brain. So just another reason to like just say no. Like, just say no, y'all. Okay, now the thalamus, all right, it's going to sit above the hypothalamus. So we pointed out the little like egg-shaped region. Your thalamus does something pretty interesting. It is a relay station for all incoming sensory information except smell. Smells just different, y'all. Don't ask why. It just is what it is. But literally anything else. Okay, so sight, touch, hearing, anything. All the other sensory information is coming to your thalamus. And then your thalamus decides which part of the cerebral cortex that information needs to go for interpretation. So we have visual signals. They come in to the thalamus, and your thalamus is like, oh, okay, this is visual. Let's send this to the occipital region so we can get it to the visual cortex. Okay, things like that. It also suppresses unimportant information, so information that we don't really need to elicit a response to. So for example, clothes touching your body. Okay, so when you first put clothes on, you're like, okay, I have clothes on. And then it's not too long after you put the clothes on, it's like, okay, cool, nobody cares anymore. We don't even consciously recognize that the clothes are still touching your body because there's really no need to. Okay. And then this also helps regulate your sleep-wake cycle, okay, in conjunction with your hypothalamus and one more region called your pineal body or your pineal gland. Here's your pineal gland. It is itty-bitty, teeny-tiny, okay, but it does sit right next to your thalamus and very close to your hypothalamus, so these guys work together. Your pineal gland specifically secretes something called melatonin, which you may or may not be familiar with. You can purchase melatonin supplements, but melatonin is one of the main things that helps you regulate that sleep-wake cycle. So people will take melatonin to kind of help them go to sleep at night. All right, so we have previously talked about how we get motor signals from your cerebral cortex down and out to your skeletal muscles. Okay, but now we're talking about sensory information. So now we need to talk about how we take sensory information that's being collected from your peripheral nervous system. How do we get that up through your spinal cord to your brain to process that information? So let's talk about sensory input running through ascending tracks. Okay, so motor signals, right? Motor output went through descending tracks, right? Because we took the information from the brain and we put it out. We go down and out to the body to get motor movement, but now we're taking sensory information from the body. We have to move it up, okay, ascending tracks up to your brain. Okay, so this is just a little bit more complicated. Okay, so if you remember descending tracks, we took an upper motor neuron We took it down the spinal cord. It may or may not have decussated. We synapsed with the lower motor neuron, which took it out to the skeletal muscles. Okay, that one wasn't too bad. This one's just a little bit more complicated because we have 3 neurons involved. So first of all, signals coming from the body, okay, sensory signals coming from the body that go into the spinal cord are going to use a first order neuron. Okay, so this red one, okay, this is our first order neuron. We're going to go into the spinal cord. Okay, and at some point we are going to synapse. Okay, could be a little higher up, could be almost immediately, and that really just depends on what kind of information we're sending. Okay, but this is all sensory information. So the first order neuron takes it into the spinal cord. Okay, where we are going to synapse with a second order neuron in the spinal cord. Okay, so here's our synapse here, and here's our synapse here. Okay, this white one now is our second order neuron, and it takes that signal all the way up to the thalamus. Okay, so our white second order neuron all the way up to the thalamus. Okay, decussation, again, can happen in different regions. Okay, no big deal. We know what decussation means now. The thalamus decides if and where that sensory information should go to the cerebral cortex. So if we decide that we do need to send it to the cortex, we're going to synapse with a third order neuron. Okay, so we're going to go from the thalamus. That third order neuron, this black one, is going to go to the exact proper location, okay, the exact cortex area for processing. Okay, so here we go, the exact correct place for processing. Okay, so again, we're going up, not down. Okay, and now we're using 3 neurons instead of 2 because everybody is going to have to stop in the thalamus. Okay, except smell. Don't forget smell's different for whatever reason. Okay. All right, so we do have some senses that just typically travel together. So position of your limbs, vibration, fine touch, kind of all run together. And then pain, temperature, gross touch, or crude touch, if you will. Those signals kind of run together as well. All right. So this is somatosensory pathways or ascending pathways. This is sensory. Okay, the last portion of your diencephalon is your pituitary gland. Okay, this is what your pituitary gland looks like. He has a very interesting shape. We have the pituitary hanging down from a stalk. That stalk specifically, here's your stalk. Stalk is kind of a hard word to say. This is called your infundibulum. Okay, this connects the pituitary to the hypothalamus. Now, we have basically 2 regions to your pituitary. We have an anterior and posterior region. Okay, we divide it based on function. So you will notice that the posterior pituitary is basically shaded the same color as your hypothalamus. This is actual nervous system tissue. Okay, however, you'll notice that the anterior pituitary is kind of a different shade, different color. That is because this is actually endocrine tissue. Okay, so your pituitary gland works with your hypothalamus to integrate nervous system and endocrine system functions. Okay, you will learn so much more about your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland with respect to endocrine function in later lectures when we talk about the endocrine system. Okay, so we're just keeping it kind of basic right now. Your pituitary works with your hypothalamus. We're going to integrate those, integrate the nervous and the endocrine system. So I'm just kind of leave it there for now. All right, then we have your brain stem. Your brain stem also has 3 regions: your midbrain, your pons, and your medulla oblongata. Okay, a lot of times your medulla oblongata will just be shortened to medulla. Okay, so just kind of FYI, if I just say medulla, this is probably what we're talking about. Okay, all right, so midbrain comes first. Okay, so this was your thalamus. Okay, we talked about that. Coming straight down, this is your midbrain region, this green region. This holds your reflex centers, right? So you have visual reflexes, auditory reflexes, tactile reflexes. Okay, all of those reflexes are housed in the midbrain. And then we also have what we call brain arousal via your RAS, your reticular activating system. And we'll talk about your reticular activating system here in a little bit. But just keep in mind that that function is associated with your midbrain specifically. All right, then we go down a little bit. We get to your pons. Okay, so in between the midbrain and the medulla is your pons. This assists with breathing. So this is how we switch between inspiration and expiration. Okay, and these bundles, this also contains bundles of axons that travel between the cerebellum and the rest of the central nervous system. So we talked about the fibers that help connect the cortex with the rest of the brain. Okay, and so we do have axons that kind of just travel through the pons to get to the cerebellum to help with coordinated muscle movements. Okay, so you will find those there. And then last but not least, the medulla oblongata, okay, or just the medulla. This is located, here we go, between the pons and the spinal cord. Okay. We have 4 quote-unquote centers of the medulla. We've got your cardiovascular center, which controls heart rate, your respiratory center, which controls your respiration rate. And so we mentioned your pons helps control breathing by switching between breathing in and breathing out. Your respiratory center of your medulla helps control how quickly you're breathing. Okay. You have your emetic center, which is basically vomiting. You probably never thought that you would need an entire quote unquote region of your brain devoted to vomiting, but now you know. And then you have a vasomotor center, which controls your blood pressure by helping control the diameter of your blood vessels, so we can vasodilate or vasoconstrict there. Okay. This also contains neuron tracts that ascend or descend between the brain and the spinal cord as well, to get to the higher or the cortex regions of the brain. So again, we go back to some of those fibers that help connect the brain to the other parts of the body. I told you we'd come back to the RAS, the reticular activating system. We mentioned that it's highly associated with the midbrain, but we do have a little bit running down the pons and the medulla as well. You can see those signals are going to go to all different parts of your cerebral cortex. And we said it had to do with brain arousal. We're going to keep the brain alert. Okay, and filter out unnecessary sensations. Ooh, okay, so we're going to help kind of make sure that unnecessary information doesn't clog up your thalamus if we can help it. Now, we can kind of tone down your reticular activating system. Alcohol kind of tones it down, kind of puts it to sleep. Hypnosis also kind of puts this to sleep, making it a little bit more suggestive to certain things, like maybe, oh, we put you under hypnosis and be like, oh, smoking is bad, don't do that. And we're like, oh, okay. But now LSD kind of cranks everything up. You get sensory overload, which can lead to hallucinations. So again, if you need another reason why you don't need to do illicit drugs, here it is. You don't want to hallucinate.